Night, my brother looked me in the eye at our dad's retirement party and said, "Natalie works so hard, too bad she has nothing to show for it except a career." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I picked up my wine glass, took a slow sip, and smiled like I hadn't heard a word. But inside, something shifted. Something that had been bending for years finally broke clean. Let me back up. I'm 31 years old. I'm a senior software engineer at a mid-sized tech company in Austin, Texas. I make good money. Not Silicon Valley money, but comfortable, stable. I own my apartment and max out my 401k money. I've been working since I was 16, first at a coffee shop, then through college on a partial scholarship I supplemented with part-time jobs, then straight into my career the week after graduation. I built what I have from nothing, and I'm proud of that. My family knows this. They've always known this. And for the past 4 years, they've treated my financial stability the way some people treat a vending machine. Put in enough attention. Get out what you need. It started small, the way these things always do. My brother Kevin is 34. He married his college girlfriend, Stephanie, right after graduation, had 2 kids by 28, and has been perpetually in between opportunities for most of his adult life. He's not lazy exactly. He just has very big dreams and a very low tolerance for the grinding, unglamorous work it takes to get there. He's tried dropshipping, personal training, a podcast about cryptocurrency that lasted 4 episodes, and most recently, a consulting business with a website he paid someone on Fiverr $200 to build. Stephanie works as a dental hygienist and covers most of their bills. She's a good person. She's exhausted. My parents are in their early 60s. Dad just retired after 30 years in logistics management. Mom does part-time bookkeeping for a few small local businesses. They're not broke, but they're not comfortable either. They made some decisions in their 50s that didn't pan out. A timeshare they're still paying off, a used RV that sits in their driveway and runs about half the time, some credit card debt that accumulated during a stretch when Dad's hours got cut. When I started making real money at 27, I wanted to help. I genuinely did, not because anyone asked me to, at first. My dad mentioned offhand that their water heater had gone out and I said, "I'll Venmo you for it." My mom said Kevin and Stephanie were having a tough month and I transferred enough to cover their electric bill without being asked twice. That's how it starts. You say yes once and suddenly yes is the default. Within a year, I had a loose but very real arrangement with my family that nobody ever put into words. I was covering my parents' cell phone plan. 4 lines, including Kevin and Stephanie's at $240 a month. I was sending my parents $300 on the first of every month, which they called just until your father's pension kicks in, right? Except the pension had already kicked in and we just never revisited the number. I had paid for Kevin and Stephanie's car insurance twice when they couldn't swing it. I had given my parents $4,000 toward a new roof on their house. I had co-signed on nothing. I was smart enough for that, but I had handed out, by the time of my dad's retirement party, somewhere in the neighborhood of $38,000 over 4 years. $38,000. I know that number exactly, because I went back through my bank statements one Sunday afternoon about 2 weeks before the party. I wasn't even angry when I did it. I was just curious. I had been feeling vaguely uneasy for a while, the way you feel when you know something is off, but you haven't looked directly at it yet. So I looked. $38,000. Transferred, Venmo'd, handed over in cash at Christmas. With no paperwork, no agreements, no loans, just gifts. Because that's what they were. Gifts I had chosen to give. What I noticed, going through those statements, was something else. In 4 years, I had received exactly 3 thank you texts that mentioned money specifically. 3. I know because I searched my messages. My mom had sent, "Thank you, honey, you're such a lifesaver," twice, and my dad had sent, "We really appreciate your help, sweetheart," once. Kevin had never, not once, acknowledged any of it in writing. Stephanie had texted me a heart emoji after the car insurance thing. I put my phone down and sat with that for a long time. The retirement party was at my parents' house a Saturday in late October. About 25 people, relatives, old neighbors, a few of my dad's work friends. My mom had ordered a sheet cake and my aunt brought a veggie tray. It was genuinely nice, actually. My dad was emotional in a good way. I was glad I'd come. Kevin was in a mood. I noticed it when I got there. He had that particular energy he gets when he feels overlooked. A little too loud, a little too eager to have opinions about things. He'd been telling anyone who would listen about his consulting business how a major client was in talks with him, how things were really starting to move. I had heard variations of this for 2 years. I smiled and nodded and went to get myself a drink. An hour into the party, a few of us were standing around the kitchen island. My dad's former co-worker, this sweet woman named Paulette, was asking me about Austin and my job. I was telling her about a project I'd been leading, a platform migration, genuinely interesting work, and she was asking good questions, and I was actually enjoying the conversation. Kevin drifted over. For a few minutes, he just listened. Then Paulette asked me if I had plans to stay in Austin long-term, and I said I was thinking about buying a house in the next year or two, that prices had come down enough to make it realistic. And Kevin said, "That's the thing about Natalie, she works so hard. Too bad she has nothing to show for it except a career." He said it with a smile. Like it was a joke. Like it was a compliment wrapped in a gentle little insult, the kind that leaves you no clean way to respond, because if you react, you're the one who can't take a joke. Paulette looked uncomfortable. My dad, who was standing 2 feet away, laughed softly and changed the subject. Nobody said anything. I smiled. I took a sip of my wine. I excused myself a few minutes later and went to the bathroom and stood at the sink and looked at my own face in the mirror for a long time. Nothing to show for it. I was 31 years old. I owned my apartment. I had a fully funded emergency fund, a retirement account I was proud of, and the financial freedom to fly home for my father's retirement party on 48 hours' notice without checking my bank account first. I had given this family $38,000 because I loved them and I could, and my brother had just told a room full of people that I had nothing to show for my life. I thought about what I wanted to do. I thought about it very carefully, standing at that sink. I could bring it up, make him apologize in front of the same people. But Kevin would get defensive and it would become his moment, his wound, and my parents would spend the rest of the party managing his feelings. I could pull him aside, have the conversation quietly. But I had had quiet conversations with Kevin before, and they went nowhere and cost me energy I didn't have. Or I could do nothing tonight. Go home, and then do something that actually meant something. I went back to the party. I hugged my dad before I left. I drove to my hotel, opened my laptop, and started looking at numbers. Here is what I decided, and here is why. For 4 years, I had been the financial cushion for my family because I told myself it was love. And part of it was. But part of it, the part I had never been honest about, was that the money was also a kind of membership fee. If I kept paying it, I stayed the good daughter, the helpful sister, the one who had her act together and shared the benefits. The money bought me a role in this family that felt warm and needed. What Kevin's comment told me was that the membership wasn't real. I was paying into something that didn't consider me a full member. I was useful. That's different from being valued. I didn't cry about it. I made a spreadsheet. I listed every recurring financial contribution I was making. The cell phone plan, the monthly transfer to my parents, the car insurance I'd been asked about twice in the past year. Kevin had already texted me in September with, "Hey sis, the renewal is coming up. Any chance you could help us out again?" I had said I'd think about it and then just not answered yet because I didn't know what to say. I decided that I would stop. All of it. Not gradually, not with a long explanation. I would give proper notice, 30 days, so no one ended up in a genuinely dangerous situation. And I would be honest about why. I slept on it for 2 weeks. I didn't want to make a decision from anger. By November, I was certain. I wrote 3 separate messages, one to my parents, one to Kevin, one to Stephanie, because she had never actually said anything cruel to me, and she was dealing with her own difficult situation, and she deserved her own conversation. My parents' message took me the longest to write. I told them that I loved them, and that I was glad I had been able to help over the past 4 years, and that I needed to step back from the financial support I had been providing. I told them the monthly transfers would stop after December. I would give them 30 days' notice on removing them from my cell phone plan. I thanked them for raising me to be someone who could build a stable life. I did not mention the party. I did not mention Kevin's comment. I wanted my parents to receive this as a decision about my life, not a punishment for someone else's behavior. Kevin's message was shorter. I told him I would not be covering car insurance in the future and that I was removing everyone from my phone plan at the end of the following month. I told him I hoped his business went well. I told him I loved him and I needed some distance for a while. Then I sent the messages and put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and went for a run. My mom called within 20 minutes. I didn't answer. I felt bad about that. I knew she was probably scared and confused and not entirely sure what she'd done wrong. But I also knew that if I picked up, I would end up managing her emotions for an hour and possibly talking myself out of something I'd thought through carefully for 2 weeks. My dad called twice. I let those go too. Kevin called once and texted 3 times within the first hour. The texts escalated in a way that was almost impressive. The first one was, "What's going on?" The second was, "I think you're overreacting." The third was, "You know what? Fine, we don't need your help anyway." That one almost made me laugh. You don't need my help. After 2 years of help you never once said thank you for. Stephanie texted me separately. She said she understood, that she was sorry if things had ever felt one-sided, that she hoped we could still have a relationship. I appreciated that. I texted her back. The calls kept coming. Over the next 3 days, my mom called 11 times. My dad called 6. Kevin called 4 more times and then went quiet. I let all of them go to voicemail. I read the voicemails instead of listening to them because hearing my mother's voice would have wrecked me, and I needed to stay clear. On the 4th day, I called my mom back. She answered on the first ring. The first thing she said was, "I just don't understand, Natalie. What did we do?" I had prepared for this. Not a script exactly, but I had thought about what I wanted to say and what I didn't. I told her that I loved her and that this wasn't about something they'd done to me. I told her that I had been contributing to the family for 4 years in a way that had stopped feeling sustainable and that I needed to make a different choice for myself going forward. I told her that this didn't change how much I loved her and Dad. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "But is this because of something Kevin said at the party?" I paused. "It's because of a lot of things," I said, "that have been building for a long time." She started to cry a little. I stayed on the phone. I didn't apologize. Then she said, "He didn't mean anything by it, honey. You know how Kevin is." And there it was. The exact sentence I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it. "I know," I said. "And that's kind of the point." My mom went quiet again. "I've been contributing to this family because I love all of you," I said. "But I think somewhere along the way it stopped being something anyone really saw. And that's on me too, partly for not saying anything sooner. But I'm saying it now. I need to take care of myself." She said, "I just don't want you to feel like we don't appreciate you." "I know you love me," I said, "but love and appreciation are different things, and I've needed the second one for a while." We stayed on the phone for another 20 minutes. It wasn't a fight. It was actually one of the more honest conversations I've ever had with my mother, which maybe says something about how much the previous 4 years had been built on things we weren't saying. Kevin and I didn't speak for 2 months. When we finally talked, a Sunday phone call my mom had orchestrated, he was calmer than I expected. He didn't exactly apologize. He said he hadn't meant it the way it came out, which is Kevin's version of an apology, and I accepted it for what it was. I wasn't looking for a dramatic reckoning. I just needed him to know that his words had landed and that I had heard them. What I found in the months after all of this is that removing the money from the equation changed the dynamic in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. My parents called more, not to ask for anything, just to call. My mom started telling me things about her week. Small things, the way she used to when I was in college. My dad and I had a long conversation about his retirement, what he was enjoying and what he missed, that had nothing to do with logistics or finances. It was honestly nicer. Kevin and I are cautious with each other now. That's okay. I don't need us to be close. I need us to be honest. Stephanie and I text occasionally. She's going back to school part-time for her dental hygiene supervisor certification. I told her I thought that was great. I meant it. I still love my family. That's never been the question. Here's what I know now that I didn't know. 4 years ago, generosity without boundaries isn't generosity. It's an audition that never ends. You keep performing, keep being the helpful one, the responsible one, the one who has it together and shares the surplus, hoping that eventually someone will hand you the membership card that says you belong here, that you are valued here, not just useful. Nobody hands you that card. You have to decide for yourself that you already earned it. I own my apartment in Austin. I'm saving for a house. I max out my retirement accounts. I take myself on a solo trip once a year to somewhere I've never been. Last spring, it was Portugal. This fall, I'm thinking Japan. I have a career. I have a savings account. I have a life I built myself. My brother said I had nothing to show for it. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and I think what he meant it, without knowing he meant it, was that I had nothing to show that he recognized. No husband, no kids, no mortgage in a suburb, no life that looked like his definition of what a life should look like. He was right. I don't have those things. I have something better. I have choices, and for the first time in 4 years, every single one of them is mine. I keep coming back to that moment at the kitchen island, the way Kevin smiled when he said it, like it was nothing. Like 4 years of quiet, steady support. $38,000 of it was just background noise, and the only thing worth noticing about my life was what I didn't have. That moment didn't break me. It clarified me. There's a version of this story where I confront him at the party, or where I cry in the hotel room, or where I eventually just let it go and keep sending money because keeping the peace feels easier than facing the truth. I've seen that version play out in a lot of families. The person who gives the most often ends up shrinking the most because they've taught everyone around them that generosity requires no acknowledgement, that reliability requires no gratitude, that being the strong one means you're not allowed to have a limit. I didn't want that version. What I've learned, slowly and not without cost, is that the way you respond to being undervalued is a kind of character test, not a test anyone else grades, a test you give yourself in the quiet when nobody's watching. It would have been easy to react with pure anger, to blow up the party, to make Kevin's comment about my revenge instead of my truth. But I've watched enough people make that choice to know it doesn't actually change anything. It just creates a different kind of noise. What took real honesty was sitting with the harder question. Why had I let it go on so long? Because I had. I had handed over $38,000 without a single written agreement, without ever once saying out loud what I needed in return, which was just to be seen, not thanked lavishly, just seen. That was my part in it, and I had to own that before I could move forward cleanly. And then what took real clarity was figuring out exactly what I wanted to do, not from the hot center of the hurt, but from a calm, deliberate place 2 weeks later. The spreadsheet, the 3 separate messages, the 30 days notice. I didn't want to punish my family. I wanted to stop participating in a dynamic that was making me invisible to myself. What took real strength, and I mean the kind of strength that doesn't look dramatic from the outside, that nobody applauds, was staying quiet when the calls came flooding in. 11 calls from my mom in 3 days, not picking up, not because I didn't love her, but because I knew that the moment I heard her voice, I would fold, and I had finally made a decision that was right for me, and I needed to hold it. Kevin said I had nothing to show for my life. I think what he actually revealed, without meaning to, was that he had never really looked at my life. He had looked at what he could use from it. You can love people and still recognize that the way they treat you has a cost. You can be generous and still decide that generosity without respect is not something you're willing to fund anymore. Those two things can be true at the same time. It took me 31 years to understand that, but I understand it now in a way that feels permanent. I'm not angry at Kevin anymore. I'm not angry at my parents. I'm grateful, honestly, for the moment at that kitchen island, because without it, I might have kept going another 4 years. Kept paying. Kept shrinking. Kept tweeting. For the membership card that was never coming. Instead, I went home. I opened a spreadsheet. I wrote 3 honest messages, and then I started very quietly choosing myself.